what I'd like to do is I'd like to add in a piece of one of the other questions, and I think it'll probably be fine with your response. One of the other questions that's on here relates to something that David said, which is we should keep a secular view with regard to this with Egypt. I'd like to generalize away from particular regions and just ask in general this question that says, when critically analyzing current events, should secular views always be used? When, if ever, is it more appropriate to analyze events in specific religious perspectives? And so I suspect that, Charles, probably that would be okay with regard to whatever you were going to say, I bet.
Yeah, certainly. Secularism as a viewpoint is okay in terms of being viewpoint neutral, in terms of trying to look at everything equally without taking favors to one or the other. But it's not. But secularism shouldn't be given priority as a worldview of its own in terms of how we should look at things. So we shouldn't look at things from the secularist viewpoint, in the sense that we assume that all faiths are wrong, are flawed or untrue, and or other aspects of the secularism viewpoint, which can have its own worldview in terms of what is the meaning of humanity and what is its role in the world. And it's great that there is a humanist worldview, but so I'm just trying to tease out the difference between looking at something secularly, meaning viewpoint neutral, and looking at it from a secular perspective, meaning that we're assuming the humanist perspective. And I just wanted to say on the back question that it's important for the U.S. From the U.S. perspective, it's important for us to be concerned about our national security, especially in the Middle East. We have interests there, and that's completely understandable. But I think there should be a more equal application of, say, the human rights, the idea of human rights and religious freedom. For instance, why should we, for years, let Mubarak and his regime in Egypt get away with some human rights abuses or limits on religious freedom just because they supported Israel, and now be really concerned about the Muslim Brotherhood impinging on people's religious freedom if they come to power. So the idea is that if we apply a human rights perspective consistently, then we wouldn't be in that situation. We could say this is how we've always viewed it, and we can continue to view it this way.
I wanted to just reply to the secular comments. To be a humanist generally means that you are a secularist. To be a secularist does not in any way mean that you are a humanist. Secularism is not a religious belief. It's not the affirmation of any religious belief, and it's therefore not only neutral, but also in theory supportive of the rights equally across the board of all religious beliefs and all religious doctrines, without placing one as being more correct, right, legitimate, acceptable, or appropriate than any other. So it's very easy in a conversation like this to associate secularism with outspoken secularist leaders, and those people have sometimes come from agnostic, atheist, or humanist groups. And while that's the case, there are also very public and very huge supporters of secularism within the Catholic tradition, within the Protestant tradition. And like Ibu Patel, for example, is a very big secularist. So be careful not to equate the two in any way. It's really a one-way relationship where people who tend to be non-believers tend to be secularists, but secularism in no way makes a statement or a comment about the superiority or inferiority of religious belief in general or any specific religious creed.
I have one final question, which I want to sort of shorten again a little bit, or actually I don't need to too much. And it's about America may or may not be swinging towards a trend of secular appearance. There are currently large numbers of examples of religious impositions in the U.S. Do you think the future appearance of religion in America will become more public, more private, or stay the same? So do you think, so again, I want to think ahead to the future and the appearance of religion, and I'd actually like everyone to do a round table. So Emily, I'll start with you, and I'd like everyone to do a short response. We are running over a little.
Sure. Okay. Well, so regards to the future, I think we're going to stay relatively the same. However, are moving more in the direction of religion going more into the private life. However, I think that coming from an entirely secular perspective, that we need to not, or we need to remember, not forget, we need to remember that religions are representative of a larger thing, and that's culture and different peoples and backgrounds. And I think that neglecting, not that I'm saying that this would be neglecting religion, but neglecting religion is neglecting like a lot of, is neglecting diversity. And I also think specifically that the phrase under God in the Pledge of Allegiance is eventually going to be taken out, or something is going to be done there. I've read the court case that happened in New Hampshire. I think there are very weak arguments. It was basically a court case that was tried in a time where we weren't ready to take the clause out, and I think that we're moving towards a time where that's going to happen. So that's what I have to specifically say about that. But I also think that we need to remember that our politicians and the people who they represent are still coming from their own perspectives and backgrounds, and that that's fueling their action, whether they want it to or not, because those are their life experiences and those are their firm beliefs. So, I guess
I think that in politics, I think it's going to become more secular and less religious, and I think that that's a positive move, sort of like what you were saying about taking under God out of the Pledge of Allegiance. I think what we'll see in terms of the public sphere, because of some of the legal precedents that have been set, like you were speaking about before, people will still continue to express their religious beliefs in public and will continue to be able to do so. So that will just be a reflection of the percentage of people believing in one specific religion or another. Non-believers are one of the fastest growing groups in the country, so that may speak to what direction we're headed in for now. But historically, there's been a wide pendulum swing back and forth where you'll see revivals where the religion is much more public, and followed by more publicly secular times where even the religious tend to take it more into the home. So I think it's kind of tough to say, and it sort of also depends on how far out in the future we're looking. But I think the important part of this, and what I'm really hoping for, is that in government, it is moving out of government. And I would include in that, hopefully, some of the big donors to specific political candidates will decrease the amount of money that they're able to give for religious reasons. The Church of Scientology, for example, is one of the largest groups in terms of how much money they give to political campaigns. So, and I think that can have a huge influence on government in a non-secular way without being obvious and without being in the public eye.
I think I'm going to address this on a couple different levels. I think in terms of general government policy, it's going to remain relatively similar. The First Amendment has a long history of separating religion and state. I doubt that will change. Some of the nuances may, but that won't, overall that policy won't change. In terms of demographics, I really have no idea. Defining, I think, while we can measure demographic groups, if you look at Catholicism in the United States, people have hugely different views of what that means. Non-belief, Muslim, and in every, so it's hard to measure what people's personal views are. So it's hard, people identify as Catholic or Christian, and that affects their lives in a ton of different ways. So I think in terms of demographics, it's hard to know what's really going to happen, and even hard to measure in any way at any time. In terms of the political process, as Emily was saying, you can't remove religion from politics. People have religious views. They have a secular viewpoint, a religious viewpoint, and that informs, how they're going to approach public policy. And, I think that's good because, the political system our political system is based on a competition of ideas expressed through the electoral process. So, I'm actually in favor of, religion or any other ideas or life experiences, however you choose to express that, being, vibrantly protected by the government. As long as, so I actually think it's good to have religion and politics, connected as an expression of viewpoints, as long as, the minority opinion or the rights of others are respected. So I really can't see religion. There's no way to separate religion and politics as long as we continue to elect people.